there is an awful lot of learning that will take place outside four walls, and we want to change teachers' mindset that learning takes place only in the classroom.
First warnings, I am not totally au fait with political correctness, but I will try to do my best. When working on all the projects, I'm going to show you pictures, and see some of those go back many, many, many years. I was their president, vice president, trustee or patron. Now, I'm not saying that to swank, but showing that I'm getting very, very old, and I don't work on 6 cylinders anymore. So a breath of air works wonders. Together we are going to take a look at the changes that have taken place in my lifespan, changes that relate to learning in the open. I don't know whether this will work, but here goes. You asked me. Next slide, please. Now, I was brought up on the best books of all, Swallows and Amazons. And if you haven't read them, you should be really ashamed of yourself, because 4 of them are about kids going on fantastic holidays, and they were finding that the wildlife was disappearing. They did something about it. And that is why David Bowie turned up in a long time after as a campaigner for stopping the world being, and I'm afraid it is getting worse and worse and worse at this moment. We are losing things, and we've got to stop it. And the best way of stopping it is get your pupils out in the fresh air. Yes, back in those days, they camped, they sailed, they tramped, learning about all the living things that we depend on. And they knew that because they used to catch fish and things and eat them. You know, and these were kids having wonderful, wonderful active holidays. Our next one, yeah. And here's the Wildlife Watch. I became their president and also the president of the big thing quite soon. And it was wonderful to get these kids out and teach them about natural history. And they wanted to do it. And I was soon visiting groups of schools around the country and teaching tens of thousands of children around the world, thanks to Auntie BBC. Wasn't I lucky? I went around the world probably 20 times. Making films and learning myself in the open. Right, now the first school I opened, or the garden that I ever opened, was in one of the really depressed parts of Liverpool. And the little girl that I had asked to help me cut the ribbon, and we had real scissors in those days, not plastic ones, took me by the hand and walked across this old Victorian playground where they'd put all the right things in. And you said, David, she said, you see all the trees and the shrubs, we put them there, but all the insects and all the creepy crawlies came by themselves. And I had to pop round the corner and almost cry with that one. And I went to one of our big prisons and had to put in a place there the inmates could look at this, and immediately the levels of, they wanted something. If you live in a tarmac square, then you actually need this, very, very importantly. Now, I don't know how many I've actually opened, but they were probably up in the thousands. I do 3 a day sometimes. Growing up with trees, this developed all 30 years ago in central Perthshire, and there were 16 schools, and they all started growing up with trees. On the first day at school, they had to go out, and these are primary school kids, and collect acorns and elderberries and then grow them for 5 years. And then they still do it. Sell the trees to the local, is local stock, to the local farmers. They make some money out of it. And I went back to see the first one we put in. I suppose it was 30 years ago, and the little girl who is now the headmistress of the school, and their whomping willows are wow. And so it's been growing the whole time, but we don't hear too much about it, and that's why meetings like this are so very, very important. Right. The next one, please. Boughton House. Now, Boughton House is in Northamptonshire, and I have been a trustee there for many, many years. It's a beautiful area, and every May we take up to 2,000, and they come over a 2-day period, and they learn how to look after a shooting area. Well, they absolutely love it. When I took the first groups out, I asked all the kids, all kind of just arrived, and how many of you had pets? And in those days, everyone had pets. We don't hardly get one hand going up because Mum and Dad are working, they live in small places and they can't have animals, and that is really terrible. So the first thing, and I still do it, put them in with the hunting dogs. And we did have a teacher faint once here, but now they come in and really do enjoy it, and they learn how to do and why looking after the dogs and the biodiversity of places like is very important. And I live beside one of the best shooting places in the world now, and I can walk across the fells and see every plant, every animal and every insect living in there. And they're only there because they're managed properly by people how to do it. So next one. Patrick Moore, a one-man galactic orrery. His record of open-air teachers is second to none. And we talked about glowworms, because it's very, very difficult to see people living in a town. They can't see the Milky Way, but they can't see glowworms. But they're still there. So, oh, they will go. They haven't gone. You see, it's like our bees and our butterflies. Why have they disappeared? Mainly because 4 million hectares of Britain are covered with grass, and grass doesn't make nectar, and insects aren't stupid, they go away. And we say, oh, tell what's happening in global warming, it's nothing. There is no nectar produced by cereals. And when you get to America, they have corn on the cob, and that doesn't do. So there are millions of hectares. And we say, where have the things gone? You can put them back quite quickly. The next slide, please. Yes, school farms. I used to go round to school farms because it was a very, very good way of seeing children learning where the food comes from, not from the hypermarket. And the numbers were going down because lots of people were saying, oh, we can make lots of money by closing it down and, build something. But now it's turned, and more people, we're finding more and more school farms. There was one I went to here, or not far from here, years and years ago, and I was taken by 3 primary kids, little girls, and she was saying, will you choose which pig we're going to eat next week? Wow. And I'm not making that up. I mean, kids did, back in those times, know where their food came from. And that is very, very important. School farms, there we go. I lived for 28 years very, very close to the River Wandle, which flows down from the Shirley Hills into London. And it's the river that Admiral Nelson learned the art of fly fishing. Now, why should I tell you that? I don't know how he did it, because he only had one arm, and no one actually told us. But I'm afraid the Wandle was so badly polluted that something had to be done. And we set up a thing called the Jet Set. And we got all the kids who lived down that thing to come along and take the shocking baskets out, and slowly but surely, and even turn some of the bits of the Wandle which went underground, so we could see it on the thing, and we put brown trout back in. And we had 7 schools down the Wandle who used to breed thousands and thousands of trout and then let them go in the thing. And this was all done by kids, you know, and they did all that work, and they're still looking after their area. The next slide, please. And here we are, learning with the rain. Learn with the rain, no? Don't we sing as you go out? I mean, it's, right? Well, while you are gauging the curriculum. It would probably be too radical to scrap the curriculum completely and focus on the use of the whole school grounds for teaching. But it could help to put the fun of common sense back in to the old 3 R's!
What can I come up with? And I came up with quite a lot of ideas, and then sort of shuffled around them, and I found that they started falling into headings and groups. And I thought, well, actually, if I just focus on a few of these headings, maybe all these ideas can generate themselves just from a few pointers, really. And that's what we've got here. Okay, I've got my maths here, I've got my science. One of the things is sensory. So if there's anything to do with the senses at all, and let's think about story writing, you want descriptive writing, then anything to do with the senses, there's a really fantastic stock cupboard of senses out there, far more than in this room. Yeah. One of the things, particularly in RE, for example, we're trying to get the awe and wonder across, aren't we? And we're trying to show how something can be special. This is an emotional response one, very simple. It's just a picture frame. And if you find something that you really like the look of, I don't like the look of this, actually, that's pretty yucky, but if I wanted to highlight that, I could put a picture frame down. You could have a group of children going around doing the same thing, and then they show each other what they found. Now, there, okay, that's pretty obvious, we've probably all seen that anyway, but if there's a very small plant in here with dotty leaves, which I noticed over there, or some lovely little white marks there, this can act as the sort of focus. People see that, they think, oh, what's there? And they have a closer look, okay? Another little twist on that is the treasure finder. This is from Earthwalks and Earth Education. Very simple, just a frisbee. All you do is throw it, and guaranteed there's going to be treasure under there. It's a treasure finder. When it lands there, all you have to do is find the treasure. So you're valuing something under there. You've got to look there, you've got to find some imagination. Is it a real treasure? Hey, plants are amazing, they produce our food. That's a treasure if it's on a plant. Or is it creative? Underneath there is the skeleton of a dinosaur. Yeah? And it might just be a bit of a plant stem with just a few leaves sticking out of it. Yeah?
David Blunkett was very keen on the idea that if children had no real hope when they left school, if they were going to be unemployed for the rest of their lives, why not use that time after they left school to get them out and really involved in something that challenged them? And he announced this without telling a single civil servant. He just turned up on television and said it. And because I was responsible for policy on outdoor learning, I went around the sanctuary buildings. Do you know sanctuary buildings? The big edifice where the department sits. Went around knocking on doors saying, well, who's responsible for this then? And no one knew. And the following morning I came in and my boss came and looked in through the door and said, yeah, we found out no one is Richard, so it's you. You've got no extra resource, you've got no extra staff, but get on with it. Fortunately, I knew the people in the Outdoor Education Advisors panel. I knew lots of people working out in the outdoors. And so I got onto them and said, how are we going to do this? And they basically got it all organised. Now, positive activities for young people came out of that, and a number of other policies as well that all came together. And over many years now, we've had all sorts of different things that have been available for young people. And if you look at their mission as well, that's pretty much the mission for learning outside the classroom, isn't it? And this has been what they've been about for a very long time, long before the Department for Education, as it is now, thought about learning outside the classroom. There was a time when geography was just a curriculum subject where they sent you out circulars, where biology was a curriculum subject where they just sent out circulars. And then the learning outside the classroom idea came about in the department, mainly because of people like you telling them there is much more to life than just sitting there in a classroom being talked at. This is the vision for learning outside the classroom that the Outdoor Education Advisors panel has put together. And so does that work for you? Is that good? Would you argue with it? Can you see through me? I'll come back to some of the themes in this, like confident and competent staff, for example, as we go along, because I think there's things that we need to explore in more detail. So I wanted to put these in just to draw out that there are quite a few big national organisations who agree with what you are doing, who are passionate about what you're doing. And just a few little quotes like QCA, I know their days are numbered, but they were once a very important organisation, QDCA more recently. And it's quite clear from what they're saying that they think this is good stuff. Here's Ofsted, memorable activities leading to memorable learning. That one really resonates with me. I'm getting old now, as you probably noticed, and my kids are growing up, and I've seen them all the way through school. And I talked to them about what life was like for me at school. And it made me start to remember what really were the things that stuck in my mind from my school. Well, the really horrible teachers, they stuck in my mind. There were always a few of those. The really good teachers, the ones that were passionate, the ones that fired you up and made you want to do things. Very little about the classroom itself. I remember sitting in the classroom. I don't remember much about what I learned in there, apart from the really basic stuff when I was in the early years of primary school. I can remember we read a lot of books, and I can't remember what was in any of them. I can remember we were talked at, and sometimes it was almost that thing where the words come to you and they go in through your ear and they come out through your arm and into your notes, but they don't really pass through your brain in the process. But what I do really remember is when we got a chance to get out and learn elsewhere. Going up to Yorkshire, going up to the Lake District. You know, if I see a drumlin, I know what it is. I can tell my kids what a drumlin is. You don't see many around here, but you know, a glaciated valley or that sort of stuff. Sea stacks, all those sorts of things I remember. I remember as well going to various businesses in Norwich. It was part of the thing that our school did, take us around businesses to learn the processes they go through. So seeing how the printing presses worked in Jarrold's, seeing how Coleman's mustard was made, going and seeing how Corona was bottled. Do people remember Corona? I don't see that in the shops anymore. I don't know what happened to them. I like this quote because of who it was from. The National Centre for Excellence in the Teaching of Mathematics. Every subject that is taught in school can be taught outside the classroom. People automatically think of geography, they think of nature and so on. But there are ways, if you start to put your mind to it, of teaching any subject you want outside the classroom. I'm just going to say a bit more about these three particular things which I think are important factors. You can disagree with me if you want. If anyone wants to argue, feel free as we go along. We've got plenty of time at the moment. But these are three things that I think are very important and need a bit of further thought. Access for all. When I was involved in the summer activities programme in 2000, I got talking to people from the Calvert Trust in Northumberland, and they had paraplegic and quadriplegic children who were rock climbing, who were going out in canoes, who were abseiling. They had the equipment that allowed those children to be doing exactly the same things as their able-bodied peers. That was quite rare at that time. There were 2 or 3 centres around the country that could do that. Now with the Disability Discrimination Act, just about every centre out there can do something. They've all put masses of capital expenditure into facilities, accommodation and so on. And you now hear some wonderful things like all-terrain wheelchairs. I've not seen one, but it just makes your imagination run, doesn't it? The idea of a wheelchair that will go uphill, down dale. They have hoists that can help to get children into kayaks and canoes and yachts and so on. All sorts of things that are now available. So it used to be quite difficult to be able to include every child. It's much easier now. There are many, many opportunities. And so the point I'm trying to make here is make sure that you do include everyone. That you don't do something special or different for a child because they are different. Make sure that what you plan can work for all of the children in your care. Getting towards the end now, another picture. Just getting you to think about what's your vision then for the future of learning outside the classroom provision. And my vision is one of challenge, of opportunity for all, and for learning, and also for fun. And I'll leave you with that question. Thank you very much.
In the dull, grey town of Bewley, where the mice had tartan fur. ... And that was one of those lovely lines that just stopped everyone. It meant, oh, and... Oh, that was it. But then a girl picked up, well, in the boring, grey town of Bewley, where no one ever smiled, there was once a girl who laughed too much. And for an opening sentence, that is exquisite. I just think that would stop you. You know, if you opened a book and read that, you would need to read what came next. She didn't know what came next. She had a whole class who'd all gone, I said, oh, I don't know, that's it. So it was one of those hiccup moments. But it's a nice one, and it is getting people using what's around them. They don't need imagination. You just need to use your senses. So those people who are going, oh, I'm not very good at this, I can't think of things. You don't need to think of things. You just need to talk about what you can see and hear and feel and smell. That will give you good words, and that will give you good writing. But now, hold on to your bit of card, hold on to your pencil, I must remember to collect them in, I always forget. But now I'm just going to ask you to pick something up and lie about it. And just, you don't need to look for anything special. Just pick, not yet, don't move. Just pick something up, turn to someone and lie.
This is the paint off the side of an aeroplane that crashed here 80 years ago, and there's no survivors. And this is it was the Star Airline, and this was part of the paint that was on the side of the plane.
But this is a piece of pottery from a very old tribe, about 20,000 years ago, and the bumps on it, if you'd like to just run your finger over the bumps, they're actually a language. And this is a prophecy, and it says that when you find this, you'll be in the company of someone who has found great wealth.
This activity we're trying trying to get the lighthouse keeper's lunch across the river as quickly as we can. We were given a box with all sorts of pulleys and ropes in, and the idea is to set up a pulley system.
I've been on lots of these courses. They're really good, the outdoor learning courses. They give you lots of ideas. I teach in reception, but I go back and I feed it to the rest of the school.
What I want to do is really tell you a number of stories and experience of my team, not just about geography, because this is not about geography. This is about outdoor learning. And I want to start to present a case based on Ofsted evidence of the value that offers education, and in particular, learning. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Anyone know where that's from or who said that? A long, long time ago. It's Confucius. But if you think and translate that into modern day teaching, if a child is being lectured to all the time and they forget it, how often do you forget what's being told you? If you see it and it's visual, kinesthetic learning in that sense, you remember. But the most important bit is doing, because by that it reinforces your learning. You start to get you make mistakes, but through making mistakes, you often actually learn and progress. And it is about progressing in learning. So I always have that as my mantra. It's really, I do and I understand. And it's so important that our children actually and students have the opportunity to do and to understand. And unfortunately, in many schools, that is not the case. There are a number of reports. I know there's been a big geography one which I wrote, and it came out in February. Well worth reading. I believe you've got some excerpts from that in your actual files. Some other ones you may want to look at is Learning Outside the Classroom. That was published by Ofsted a couple of years ago and is quite a very important document which has had far-reaching consequences. And also I've had a responsibility for sustainable development, and the latest one of 3 was published last year about improving schools, improving lives, and that actually traced the way in which a school actually did improve by using the environment more effectively, and there are about 14 schools involved in that, and all bar one actually showed significant improvement over a 3-year cycle. So those are some reports you might like to look at. But it is about first-hand experiences. How often do we actually ask children to write about things we don't know about? I see that both in secondary schools and in primary schools, particularly when it's creative writing. And what does the child do? They start off, we're going to do something about the wood. The child starts off with an opening sentence, and then they think, well, I don't know what a wood is really like. I've seen them on in the pictures. And before you know it, and how many of you have actually marked these sorts of creative writing accounts where automatically you think, I saw that on television yesterday, or it's something they've viewed. The violence creeps into the boys' ones in particular, and the other ones go into this magical world, which they don't really believe in because they don't understand it. I'll give you an example of how, in fact, outdoor learning can actually add value. I actually visited a school, a primary school in Leeds, and a small primary school. Year 5 and 6 were a joint class, and they'd been to 2 visits into the Yorkshire Dales to the villages of Linton and Burnsall. They'd spent a day in Linton, a day in Burnsall, doing all sorts of interesting things, finding out, talking to people, mapping, planning, just discovering. So they'd actually been out there. And I went not to observe a geography lesson, but to observe a literacy lesson, first thing in the morning. And the teacher was looking at developing writing and developing and using comparisons. So basically, she started off with a sentence, Linton and Burnsall are small villages in the Yorkshire Dales. And she said, what do you think of the word small? And the kids went, boring. So they started to come up with alternatives. And eventually it was replaced by the word quaint. And gradually, she started to slip in other sentences and then got the children to start writing. At the end of that lesson, I gave it outstanding. It was outstanding literacy, but it was also outstanding geography. And the reason it was outstanding was not just the skill of the teacher in planning that lesson and bringing the kids to use that. It's because the children knew what they were writing about. They'd been to Linton and Burnsall. They knew what it was like. They'd talked to people there. And the writing, as a result, was enriched and of very, very high quality. And how often do we ask children to write about something they haven't got first-hand experience of? Increasingly, our children are being, how shall I put it, mothballed in many cases, cotton-wooled. I remember my own childhood. I was brought up on the moors between Keighley, you know, Haworth and all that area, Heathcliff and all that sort of stuff from the Bronte land, and Halifax. My childhood, I think if the local council had got hold of me and my brother, we'd have been in care. We were never in the house. Just William's stories seem to bear a resonance with me, because that's what my early childhood was like. I know there was actually clay mines in the side of the hillside where we used to live, with old tunnels going in, because they used to make pottery there called Halkin's pottery. And I actually remember getting into these tunnels, past these grills, until it got to the stage the tunnel was blocked at the end. And we had some wonderful adventures in there. These moments don't seem to exist, because this article here actually was taken from a study, and it's about middle-class mothers are afraid to take their children rambling because, wait for it, they struggle to read maps and are worried about mud and danger. And the countryside is off limits. This was some research carried out by Hertfordshire University, and things that the mothers were concerned about. They were obsessed with injury and dirt. They're very scared of their children not only being run over and even being stolen when they were with them. They also seemed an obsession about cleanliness. Perhaps it was all the designer gear. I mean, one or two of you are sort of nodding. I know those sorts of parents. Perhaps one or two of you might be those parents, so don't tell me. To me, there's a classroom and there's an outdoor classroom. And there are benefits in both. But very often the outdoor classroom gives you something extra. One of the things I do when I go into schools, and my team do, is there's a question I ask all the kids at the end. If there's one thing you can do, if you could wave a magic wand and improve geography in your school, what would it be? And 9 times out of 10, the kids say, we want more field work, we want to go outside and see what's done. And I think that's not just symptomatic with geography. Children like to go outside. They get excited by going outside, whether it's a visit to somewhere or whether it's actually something they're doing in science or geography or whatever in the field. They get excited by it, and they do learn a lot more. It's also about putting theory into practice. And the schools that have developed their outdoor environment use it in other subjects. So I visited one secondary school where they were sort of looking at their... they were looking at their local grounds, and they actually got the children to design it in design and technology and maths. All the measurements that were involved, working out angles, submitting designs, and these were then put to architects, and they worked with architects to help design their own school grounds and some of the new buildings that were going in there. So, putting theory into practice. Very often we ask children to put theory into practice without having that practical experience, and that's also important. I visited a school in Hereford, and the children were out in the garden, and I noticed some foxgloves there. And the children were close to the foxgloves, and of course, if you know foxgloves, poisonous, so, you know, that's the first health and safety thing. And I just said to them, I said, can you tell me this plant, can you tell me that plant? And they were telling me what they were growing. And I thought, this is brilliant, because they're better than me, because I didn't recognise some of the plants myself, but I pretended to. Being an Ofsted inspector, you've got to do a lot of pretending sometimes as well. Anyway, they were telling me all these plants, and I thought, oh, I'll have to grow some of those myself. And then I said, what about that one, which I recognised as a foxglove? And they said, oh, gave me the Latin name, something digitalis, can't even remember it. And they said, we mustn't touch that. And they started to give reasons. And I'm thinking those children are actually, you know, because it's easy, it's a nice purple flower, etc., and your children do pick it up. And of course, there are issues. And again, ivy. Why do you think you call it poison ivy as well? If you've got ivy anywhere around, that's a poisonous plant. The children need to wash their hands if they've touched it. So again, they were very much aware of it and actually could tell me about safety in the countryside. But I want to tell you a true story, and a very important story, of a school I inspected 2 or 3 years ago. This school is very close to the Manchester City Stadium. It's the Commonwealth Games Stadium in Manchester. Like the Olympic Stadium in the East End of London, it was an area that needed regeneration, and they used the opportunity of the Commonwealth Games to regenerate it and build this magnificent stadium for the Commonwealth Games, which has now been taken over by Manchester City Football Ground. But the area around it still remains one of the most deprived areas in the country. We're talking about many broken families, many children whose whole world is essentially one room and they're sleeping on dirty, wet mattresses on the floor. The number of children who, when they came to the school, when I visited it, had nits and things like that literally crawling over them. Parents with high drug dependency, etc. These children have a very poor start in life based on their home upbringing. I was due to inspect this, full inspection, and the head teacher sent me her self-evaluation form, which is going to be disappearing soon, so you're all right in that respect. And on it it said, standards inadequate, achievement inadequate. And I thought, is this someone who's committing, you know, harikiri or whatever it happens to be? So I rang her up and I said, I hope you realise by those 2 opening statements, you're actually saying we are a failing school. We are a special measures school. And she said, I'm being honest, our standards are some of the lowest in the country. And obviously we think we do a good job for our children, but I have to be honest, progress is small compared to some of the other schools around, outside this area. So I went along with a heavy heart. At lunchtime I called my team of 2 together and I said, we're not failing this school. We're going to make sure this school gets at least a satisfactory. And the reason behind that was several experiences in that first few hours in the school made me think this school was doing something for these children. Remember I said earlier on about raising aspirations, about opening minds, about broadening horizons. Well, this school decided that if they just focused on literacy and numeracy, they were on a hiding to nothing. It would turn the children off. So they decided that as part of their entitlement for children, every single child would get an out-of-classroom experience every month. And this would be funded out of the school funds because these children didn't have the money. And if you live in an urban environment like that, there's lots in Manchester you can do. So the children had been to Manchester City Football Ground, they'd been to Old Trafford, they'd been to various museums, they'd seen various Olympic swimmers preparing for the Beijing Olympics in the swimming pool, they'd been to see the cyclists and Chris Hoy and that lot practicing for their Olympic bids, etc. So they'd had a whole range of these experiences. And I remember talking to this 8-year-old girl very early on, and I said, and what's your name? And I can't remember her name, Elizabeth or something. And she said, I said, where have you been recently? And she said, I've been to Manchester Art Gallery. Now then, culturally, I'm a bit backward. To me, I don't do art galleries. I find them pretty boring. You go in, there's 300 pictures, you dash through, and at the end of it, you can't remember any of them. I don't know why, I've not had an interest, and I thought, I'm going to get a negative here from this girl. So I said, and how did you find that experience? And she said, it was really surprising. I really enjoyed it for 2 reasons. And I said, what was the first reason? And she said, well, Coronation Street was filming there, so we met some of the actors and actresses. Well, she was honest. And the second thing that she said to me, she said, I didn't realise there were so many interesting pictures and paintings. And I thought, oh, great, yeah. She suddenly, yeah. And I was going to dismiss it, and then she said, and you know what I did next? And I says, oh, what did you do next? She says, on the Saturday, I took my baby brother and my mum down to show them. And all of a sudden I thought, this child has suddenly started to become aware of what's around her. And not only that, to bring her mother, who perhaps had never been anywhere beyond the local precinct, into that. I'm thinking it's starting to broaden your minds. And I'm suddenly thinking, does this sound like a failing school? So I got my team together, and I thought, they're trying to do something. They're trying to use outdoor learning to raise aspirations and to build up children's hopes, to make them aware that there's something beyond the four walls of their little tenement, etc., out there. And we did see that although the results weren't there, and this, you know, people say Ofsted, they look at statistics. We don't just look at statistics. Statistics, you know, statistics can show you something. We looked to see if there was some improvement taking place, and we saw some green shoots. Nothing strong, but we saw some green shoots of improvement. And in the end, I gave it satisfactory. I gave the school satisfactory because I couldn't give any more than that. But I felt there was something happening in this school that was actually going to benefit these children, and special measures are to kill this school. And so what I'll do, and that's the end of my little story now, I will spend a little bit of time, for 10 minutes for questions if you do want, but I'll leave you with a thought. Because perhaps the most important people in that school were the teachers. They had a belief and a purpose, and they decided they were going to prove that they could actually make a difference to the lives of these children. Einstein is one of my favourite philosophers. You'll think, oh, he's a scientist. Actually, he's a real philosopher. Some of his sayings are very profound. And I'll leave you with a saying from Einstein. It's setting an example is not the main means of influencing others, it's the only means. And that's the challenge I leave you with, because you as teachers need to set that example and say, we can actually give something to these children. We can make their lives different. Those children in that last school, if they'd have been kept in those four walls, would not have had the aspirations they were starting to develop when I inspected that school. Outdoor learning is something I feel every child has an entitlement to. It can make a difference, and it's up to you as teachers to make that happen. Thank you very much.